All right, let's jump right into an explainer today that is honestly going to completely shatter all those Hollywood sci-fi myths we have about artificial intelligence. You know, when we hear AI, it is so easy to immediately picture rogue algorithms or entirely automated robots making choices for us. But what does this tech actually look like when it's governed by incredibly strict international law, human rights standards, and an absolute demand for human accountability? Well, today we are looking at the United Nations Deep Learning and Artificial Intelligence Guide for Strategic Leadership. It's this fascinating playbook designed specifically for the Office for Mine Action and Police, and it shows us exactly how one of the most critical international bodies on Earth handles truly high-stakes technology.
So here's the big question we're looking at. How exactly do you deploy AI in a literal minefield? It's a wild question to think about, right? Because for the UN police and mine action teams, using tech is a literal life-or-death situation. We aren't talking about optimizing a retail supply chain or figuring out what movie to recommend next. We're talking about incredibly volatile environments where a single error can have devastating, irreversible human consequences. So how on earth do they do this safely?
To figure this out, we're going to walk through their playbook in 5 quick parts. Number 1, high stakes, high tech. 2, support, not substitution. 3, the field reality test. 4, ethics and human rights. And finally, number 5, measuring true success. Let's get into it.
Starting off with Section 1, high stakes, high tech, focusing on the United Nations police and mine action.
Now, all this abstract tech jargon really means nothing without the actual context. OMAP, which is the Office for Mine Action and Police, provides oversight for teams operating in some of the most extreme conflict and post-conflict zones in the world. And the fundamental premise of this UN guide is that any AI rollout has to start with a specific real-world problem, not just some flashy algorithm a vendor's trying to sell them. Leaders have to sit down and ask what decision is currently taking too long, what evidence do we need to make it better, and critically, what are the harms if this system gets it wrong? And this perfectly illustrates why AI is even on the table here. It's not for flashy experiments, it's to solve absolutely massive, overwhelming data bottlenecks. Modern neural networks are brought in to assist with things like image interpretation or spotting geospatial patterns. Just literally imagine trying to manually comb through thousands of satellite images to map potential hazards in a war zone, or trying to triage a flood of critical information during a crisis. It's nearly impossible. So deep learning is only valued here if it acts as a highly efficient assistant to heavily burdened analysts, helping him process that sheer volume of data securely.
Which brings us to Section 2, support, not substitution. This is literally the core mantra of UNAI deployment.
Take a look at this comparison. The UN explicitly rejects the left side of this equation, decision substitution. There is absolutely nothing in this framework that authorizes automated operational decisions, autonomous targeting, or coercive action, period. Instead, algorithms must only act as decision support. AI is just there to increase the quality and speed of the analysis that is handed to human decision-makers. The ultimate authority stays exactly where it belongs, with accountable, designated human officials.
And here is a really crucial point. When a human expert rejects the AI's advice, that is not considered a failure. They are actually providing highly valuable learning data to improve the whole system. If an analyst looks at a supposed anomaly flagged by the AI and says, nope, based on the local context that's wrong, that is a feature, not a bug. The UN actually requires explicit workflows documenting how humans verify outputs and how these overrides are handled. Users are trained from day one to never assume that a probabilistic score from an AI gives them the authority to act without independent command approval.
All right, moving on to Section 3, the field reality test, leaving the pristine headquarters behind.
So imagine relying on an algorithmic model during a massive crisis, but you have terrible internet. Models that work perfectly in a climate-controlled New York headquarters can, and absolutely will, fail catastrophically in a conflict zone. The UN calls the solution to this operational resilience. In the field, you're dealing with spotty connectivity, broken devices, and rapidly changing conditions. A tool that only works on high-speed Wi-Fi is completely useless to a mine action expert standing in the dirt. These systems have to be able to degrade safely. Meaning, if the internet drops, users have to be able to seamlessly switch back to manual procedures without skipping a beat.
And the UN is super aware of these pitfalls, especially something called data drift. These operational environments are constantly shifting. If you train an AI on historical reports from one specific region and then deploy it somewhere entirely different, with different languages, geography, and infrastructure, that model's performance is going to rapidly degrade. That's data drift. So the UN mandates continuous real-time monitoring to catch this exact phenomenon before it ruins a critical decision.
They also have to heavily guard against adversarial behavior. Why? Because in these conflict zones, UN systems are actively targeted. The security design assumes hostile intent right out of the gate. They have to build tough safeguards against things like prompt injection, data poisoning, and credential theft, where malicious actors intentionally try to trick the system. The stakes are just way too high to treat this like standard office software.
That leads us right into Section 4, Ethics and Human Rights, setting the guardrails for high-impact tools. As you can see in this table, the UN uses a tiered risk classification. A simple administrative tool gets totally different oversight than an operational threat detector. It just makes sense, right? The higher the potential consequence for human rights or physical safety, the tighter the controls. Every single approved high-impact AI use case has to have what they call a model card. It's basically a highly detailed record describing exactly what the AI is for, where its data comes from, what its blind spots are, and a strict list of prohibited uses.
We also have to frame this tech around the actual cost of an error. The UN analyzes false positives and false negatives very differently. Look at it this way. If a system cries wolf too often, generating false positives, it wastes the precious time of specialized teams and destroys their trust in the tool. But a false negative, failing to detect a real hazard, that directly leads to casualties. Any system they use has to meticulously balance these real-world consequences.
They're also hyper-aware that using historical data to train AI is incredibly risky when it comes to impartiality. If past data reflects a reality where certain marginalized communities were excluded from reporting or where patrols were totally uneven, an AI is just going to learn and amplify those inequalities. Human rights risks aren't always about intentional bad actors. Sometimes they're literally baked into the historical data. And the UN framework demands active mitigation to prevent those unequal effects. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, Measuring True Success, Prioritizing Evidence over Technical Novelty.
To ensure no technology is rolled out blindly, they use this very rigorous step-by-step pipeline. 1. Prototype. 2. Time-bound pilot. 3. Operational validation. And 4. Scale. During a pilot, teams have to state exactly what the minimum safety threshold is, and critically, what specific evidence would justify pulling the plug on the project immediately. Decisions to scale up are based entirely on hard evidence from real workflows, not some slick vendor demonstration.
And notice what is missing from this list of metrics. You will not find model accuracy as a standalone metric here. They literally only care about real-world workflows. An AI model can have a perfectly beautiful statistical correlation on a dashboard, but if it isn't saving analyst time, if it isn't speeding up crisis response, or if it isn't demonstrably avoiding safety incidents, the UN doesn't care. It is not considered a successful investment. Real operational outcomes beat technical novelty every single time.
I think this quote directly from their strategic guide just perfectly sums up the UN's entire ethos here. The strategic objective is not to create an AI-driven organization, but a more evidence-informed office in which appropriate technology strengthens accountable human leadership. It is not about surrendering control to the machines. It's about leveraging powerful data tools to make the incredibly high-stakes jobs of human experts just a little bit clearer. The tech is just a lens to focus the evidence, empowering leaders to make lawful, ethical decisions in the most complex environments on Earth. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on regarding our growing reliance on high-stakes tech. If an algorithmic model falls completely offline in a conflict zone, are you prepared to make the call without it? Because at the end of the day, in the most extreme circumstances imaginable, accountability always rests on human shoulders. Thanks so much for exploring this framework with us today, and hopefully it gave you a really refreshing, grounded look at what deploying AI actually means when it matters most.